Welcome back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk of WilksWorld.com, and I am so incredibly grateful that you are taking the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Friends, at the D-Rate the Hate podcast, it's all about bettering the world one attitude at a time. See, we did not create the hate, but with your help, we can derate the hate. That all starts with gratitude and personal accountability. We cannot control everything that happens to us in life, but we can control how we react to it. How we act, how we react, no matter what happens to us, how we react to it makes the difference. Friends, there is only one good thing about a bad attitude, and that is that we have the ability as individuals to change it. Here on the DTH podcast, we strive to bring you great guests and provide tools to do just that. Please be sure to share it with your friends, subscribe if you haven't done so. Ratings and feedback are always greatly appreciated. And with that, let's get to this week's episode. Friends, as somebody who spends an awful lot of time these days working in the depolarization space, it never ceases to amaze me how often we get attacked by people all along the political spectrum for our efforts to bring civility to the conversation, to convince people that it's better to have a conversation, a curious conversation, and actually listen to those with whom we disagree, than to just go with the standard toxicity that you see online everywhere these days. Where do you fall in this culture war that seems to be taking place? Do you see civility as a weakness? Despite what some would have you believe, toxicity and polarization are not exclusive to any one side of the political conversation. They're just not. They never have been. They've been periods of time where one side is probably more toxic than the other, but it's definitely not exclusive to one side or the other. Now, if you're like most people, when somebody attacks what you feel passionate about, you have a tendency to attack back. It's just a self-defense mechanism. It's almost natural to do so. But why should we take the easy road? Why not take the bold and brave path of trying to understand the humanity in those with whom we disagree? Friends, in this week's episode, I invite my friends Julian Adorney and Eduardo back to the podcast to talk about their co-authored piece, Civility Isn't Weakness, It's How We Win. Another incredible DTH conversation you are not going to want to miss. Here we go. Eduardo and Julian Adorney. Welcome back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. So glad to see you both. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Great to see you again, Wilk.
Yeah, two of my good friends, returning guests to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. And when I found out that you guys had collaborated on a piece for the Quillette, I definitely wanted to get you on to talk about it. I know it's been a few weeks already, and I always love working with both of you because this thing we all do in the depolarization space is as you know, one of the most near and dear things to my heart. One of the things that I put most of my effort into, and I know you guys are as well. So thank you so much for joining me to talk about your piece. The civility isn't weakness; it's how we win, and I think it's so important. So I'm going to start off, Angel, and just well, first, kind of, I'll let either one of you guys go, whichever one of you wants to go first. But how is it that the two of you? I mean, I know that I'm friends with Julian and I'm friends with Angel, and I don't know that we've ever been on anything common, all three of us together. But the fact that you two have collaborated is so cool. So let's start off there. How did that happen? How did you guys get going together on this thing?
Well, it was Julian's idea, so he should take it.
All right.
Yeah, sure. I don't know. I've thought a lot about the importance of civility and how civility sort of gets mischaracterized as both sidesism, or gets mischaracterized as we just want to all hold hands and sing Kumbaya with people who want to destroy us. And it's not that at all. I run in very Christian circles, and so I'm familiar with some of my heroes or people who will walk into the Taliban and talk to them about, in this case, talk to them about Jesus, but you can do that with anything, right? And actually convince them to lay down their guns. And those are the guys who I follow. And I started thinking, wait a minute, civility isn't weakness at all. This is the essential ingredient to persuading people. Daryl Davis, the African American jazz musician who talks to KKK members and convinces them to give up their hoods, is the same way. And then I started reading Angel stuff because Angel obviously very well known for Starman, and he and I had been friends for a little bit. And I thought we should write about this. We should write about how we both keep getting the same attacks. And I thought we should write about how civility that we try to embody is really essential for building the kind of coalitions that are essential in a republic to actually create progress.
Mm.
Angel, what were your thoughts when Julian approached you with this idea?
Well, it's funny because I never collaborated with someone on an essay before. I've collaborated, obviously I've been in bands and things like that. So the creative process in that sense, I'm very used to, but I never thought to do it. And it never came across my desk, the idea, but Julian brought it up and I was like, well, I feel like I've already written about this, but maybe not from this exact angle. And if Julian kind of kicks it off with something, then I'll know how to respond to it and add my own 2 cents. And so that's what we did. He sent a really good draft and I just kind of added my own little sections to it and stuff, kind of bulletproofing the argument, trying to think of it from the perspective of people who disagree with us. And it ended up being actually a really fast process. Like we banged it out pretty fast. Julian did the bulk of the work he's the one who dealt with the blank page this time.
Yeah.
So he did that. He did
as somebody who's counted on Julian to do some of the heavy lifting before,
Yeah.
I can tell you what, I appreciate that too, and I know where you're coming from. So so just like so many of the works that I see from both of you guys, because I really admire both of you guys. Obviously, you guys have been with me on the podcast a few times, and we've talked about a number of things together. And like I said, I know this depolarization thing is very near and dear to all of us. And then when I read this, much like I do when I read a lot of you guys' stuff, I'm going through it and I'm hitting things with a highlighter that I want to talk about, and I get to the end and it's not a long thing. It's a quick read, but it's a perfect. It builds that point perfectly. But much like much of what I read of you guys, I get to the end of it and I'm like, I got more highlighted than I don't, and I'm like, okay, well, I could have just highlighted the whole thing. So
yeah,
but yeah, no, fantastic piece. So civility is one of these things that a lot of people, when I tell people about Braver Angels or I introduce one of the podcasts that I've been in with Angel or you, Julian, or anything that we've done together, we always talk about civility, and there's people that they just like, they're like, oh yeah, you guys want that Kumbaya thing that Julian talked about, or some kind of milk toast middle kind of. You've got to give up everything about yourself to be part of this civil middle, and that's really not what it is. Talk about that, because I know that one of the first things that stood out to me is advocates of civility are doormats for bullies, which
those are the mischaracterizations of it. Like I thought it was really important to get that out of the way and just say, look, this is not what we're talking about. We're not talking about Kumbaya with Nazis. We're not talking about just, I mean, there's the, the Jesus thing of turn the other cheek. But it's not really about that. It's like, I mean, if somebody tries to take a swing at me, I'm going to stop them, like I'm not going to turn the other cheek. That's not me anyway.
Exactly.
But philosophically speaking, it's about opening yourself up and understanding the other person and giving the other person the dignity of the fact that they're a human being. And it's also, we get to it later in the piece, it's really it's a practical thing. If you intend to be effective in persuading somebody out of their idea or out of their perspective, or in opposing their idea or perspective or behavior in any kind of effective way, you need to understand them. And the only way to understand is to sit down and go, okay, let me listen to what you have to say. Let me make sure I've got it. Let me repeat it back to you in a way that you would agree with. And then I can lay down my objections. because then at least when people feel like they're being heard and they feel like you understand them, even if you disagree, at that point they're a little bit more amenable. If they think you're just attacking, a fake version of who they are, or some horrible mischaracterization of who they are, they're just going to dig their heels in. They're just going to fight back, and that's not going to get you anywhere.
Right. At best, their ears are just going to slam shut, and they're not going to listen to what you're saying. At worst, they're just going to sit there and develop a response and not listen and not hear anything else that you're saying. So, Julian, tell me, how that is for you.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And the way I kind of think that I'm, apart from affective polarization, the main thing I talk about is the dangers of, things like critical race theory and hate speech laws and stuff like that. These sort of illiberal movements into the West. And I pull zero punches with those arguments. It's not like, oh, well, Sarah Rayo and I are like, let's meet in the middle, let's compromise.
Oh, yeah.
It's the
right.
Yeah, I pull no punches in criticizing these ideas. But the main thing is I criticize ideas and not people. And as I chose Sarah because I consider her ideas to be, relatively harmful to our social fabric. But as a person, I would say nothing critical of her. And partly this is a philosophical thing because I do believe we all have, whatever spiritual background you come from, there's something incredibly resonant about being a human. And I want to respect that in other people. As a Christian, I believe that we all have the spirit of God inside of us. So it'd be absolutely insane for me to just trash someone or tear them down. But whatever spiritual practice you adhere to, we all have that uniqueness as a human being that is absolutely worth respecting.
Mm-hmm.
I also think of civility as kind of like a tool. My mentor is a relationship coach, and so I look at it from that standpoint. If you're in a fight with your wife, your husband, and let's say you're in a fight with your wife, if you just call her a bitch and you just unload on her and call her names or whatever, first off, it's a terrible way to approach a relationship. But are you actually going to convince her?
Give me a shot. I'm just going to put that out there.
Yeah. She might, are you going to convince her at all? She's going to be like, you know what, honey, you're right. Of course, no.
Right. It's absurd.
And so, yeah. Right. And so the negotiations I've been the most successful in, at work, in my career, navigating tensions with my fiance, whatever it is, have come from a place of understanding the other person, caring about what they care about, seeing them as a human being, and then talk to them from that area in a way that lowers their barriers rather than raising their walls, And I think it's an essential technique. It's a precondition of persuading someone, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right.
There's that great Key and Peele sketch about you called your wife a bitch. You said bitch. He's like, yeah.
Made it out alive.
Yeah, which is absurd. Yeah. I mean, it's so funny because the first thing I say when I talk to people about this stuff is, well, just imagine yourself. You have something you very deeply believe in. You have this very strong conviction. And then somebody comes along who's convinced that you're wrong. And the first thing they do is call you an idiot. Mm-hmm. How are you likely to respond to that? Do you think you're going to be like, wow, maybe I am an idiot. I'm going to change my mind about this thing I really care about.
Right.
Because this guy called me a moron. That's not going to work, but that's sort of like the tactical, practical approach or perspective on the civility thing. But there's something more important that Julian and I get into in the piece, which is that civility is not merely a tactic. It's not merely an effective approach to persuasion and even opposition. It's also the fundamental building block of our republic. The whole thing hinges upon our ability to communicate with each other about things that we're going to disagree about.
Right.
The tension, the gridlock, all that stuff is inherent to the system. It's that going back and forth and that, opposing sides to any given issue. That's part of the design, but that requires people to actually be willing to engage. Otherwise, it just turns into a lot of what we've got right now, which is just who's got the bigger hammer and who can bash the other guy on the head with it faster,
Right.
Yeah.
And I like the way you guys describe it as one of our core principles. And I think that makes a lot of sense because it really is, and you guys may agree or disagree with me, but one of the things that I've seen so much in recent years is the fact that a lot of people have kind of abandoned their core principles and kind of put their core values, their core principles off to the side and said, we'll deal with this later. I mean, I know this is my core principle. I know this is my core value, but things are so hot right now. We have to address this. And the only way that we can address it is through these knockdown, drag out tactics. And I don't like that. And that's one of the reasons I ever started even paying attention to politics. And I don't know if I ever told you this, guys, but one of the reasons I ever started paying attention to politics in the first place is because I saw how toxic people treated, Bush after 9/11, and then the things that were being said about, things, which is in part why I became, what I consider a conservative Republican, was because of the toxicity that I was seeing from the left. And, so as things went on, I started to fall into that myself, right? Fall into that same kind of toxicity and fall into this kind of person that couldn't see something online or on the news or on the radio that I felt like I had this urge to react, and I wasn't reacting in a very nice way. And that's why that line that you guys put in there, a commitment to civility, is first and foremost about not becoming what we oppose. That one stood out to me big time, because I did feel like, because again, I started off as somebody who only started watching politics or paying attention to politics because of the toxicity that I saw. And now I see the party that I was a part of and I still believe in the principles, but I've seen so many become what they opposed. So who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I think there's a huge danger of that. And the whole idea of like, oh, we have our principles, but we're just going to put those off to the side because this battle is more important. There's nothing more important than our principles. Those are who we are. I think a big measure of a person's character is how they respond in stressful situations, because in easy situations, it's, everyone can be a saint. And it's also, this isn't, I don't want to like blame people here. My point is that it's psychologically bad for us. And I can speak firsthand to this because I used to be a hardcore partisan. I used to be one of the very angry people yelling online. It is psychologically bad for us when we have this much anger and fear in our psyches, and when we have so much anger and fear towards millions of Americans across the political spectrum, 99.9% of whom we've never met. It just eats us up inside. Resentment is drinking poison, hoping the other person dies. And, so many of us feel resentment towards half the US population for having different beliefs. And it's something I sort of compare it to, like, I think high degrees of affective polarization are sort of like if you're very angry and resentful towards your spouse, not like your ex-spouse, but your current spouse, because we often interact with these people on a daily basis. It's psychologically debilitating in a way that I really want to help people escape from that, if at all possible.
Yeah.
Because I know what it was like for me to suffer.
It's like the psychological equivalent of telling people to eat their vegetables.
Yeah.
Like we're kind of stuck in this place because of human nature. First of all, it's just human nature, right? We're the first instinct is to take a swing at something or to stomp on it, or, like that. That's why children have tantrums, right? They're little kids and they have 2 or 3 different ways of communicating, right? They're going to cry and they're going to stomp around and freak out and break stuff, right? They can't necessarily build anything. They can't necessarily sit down and have a conversation and, reason their way. They're just not there yet. And there's a lot of that's residual in grown-ups on the internet.
I was like that until my early 30s. So I mean,
yeah. I mean, it's true. Even adults have these sorts of things. They kind of get rerouted in different ways because people generally think you're insane if you stomp around the way a 2-year-old does, right? So you just stomp around in a different kind of way, but you're doing the same thing because you're feeding that same impulse.
Yeah.
And we have all these incentives to the internet, the social media platforms want your attention. The easiest way to get your attention is to piss you off.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also, we're not necessarily wired to know as many people as we know and to interact with as many people as we do. So we're going to take shortcuts. We're going to have stereotypes. We're going to make assumptions. And it's way easier for someone's just mental bandwidth to say, all those people suck, all of them.
Yeah, put them in that box.
Yeah, it's all of those people suck. They think this, therefore they're evil. I'm done. I don't have to do any more thinking about that. It's way more taxing psychologically, intellectually, everything to sit down and go, well, no, they don't suck. I mean, that idea sucks, but they come from this place that led them to have this conclusion that has this, like, that's all really confusing and complicated. And who the hell has time for that? Right. So we're telling people to eat their vegetables and they're like, no, I want pizza.
Right.
And it makes sense. So there's a sense in which we're really fighting against the tide here, but it's really critical that we do it because there's a lot at stake here. We can really make a mess if we're all just running around like 2-year-olds having tantrums.
Oh, that's right. I think you made a very important point talking about, not being able to or not having the bandwidth as human beings to know as many people and interact with as many people as we do nowadays. And that's one of the huge downfalls of social media, right? I mean, the reality is growing up, we probably had a few close friends, maybe a couple, and then a few acquaintances, and then that was probably about it. We had our small cliques. In my case, growing up in the Midwest and small towns and stuff like that, that might only been 10, 12 people. But the reality is the bandwidth to deal with that many opinions, that much information, it is overwhelming. So to make those generalizations, I think it's just a self-defense mechanism. So I think what you're saying is a perfect analogy, Angel, is we have to place people in those boxes, or it's probably human nature. I don't say we have to. It's probably just our nature to do so, to naturally shut out that which makes us uncomfortable.
I think that's a great point. One thing that a mutual friend of all three of ours, Monica Guzman, is famous for saying is, whoever is underrepresented in your life is overrepresented in your imagination. And so, yeah, being human and having a, somewhat flawed human mental processing system, I can't be friends with the millions of people in the US. I can't have all those relationships. It would break my brain. But I try and cultivate a few friends from across the political spectrum. So as one example, like I'm very critical of, critical race theory, DEI, stuff like that. But one of my good friends just read Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, and really enjoyed it. He found it incredibly eye-opening. And so when I'm writing an article about CRT, I don't have the random trolls who yell at me on Twitter in mind when I'm writing that. I have that good friend where it's like, okay, I know you're smart. I know you have a lot of integrity. Like, I'm writing this to and also about you. And that sort of forces up a certain level of respect for the human. And same thing when I'm writing an article about Trump supporters. I think of, two of my good friends who are Trump supporters who would like give a stranger the shirt off their back if they had to. They're incredibly generous. And so I write kind of to and for and about them with those articles. I can't be friends with everyone in the US. I can't have those relationships, but in as much as I have the capacity for relationships, I try and build them across the spectrum so that I see people as they really are, as the humans they really are, rather than just this phantasm in my head that I've completely concocted, and then just want to yell at that.
Yeah. There's also a cheat code to this. It's not, I'm not a fatalist. Just because we have this human tendency that we can understand based on our evolution and all that kind of stuff doesn't mean we're doomed to it, right? Because there are plenty of things that are human nature or that are just human impulses that make total sense from an evolutionary standpoint that we suppress and sublimate all the time, right? We don't run red lights. We have systems to incentivize against that. Like if I'm hungry and I'm walking by a fruit cart, I don't just take an apple. just because I'm hungry, right? Because I
Right.
go, no, there are rules like theft, like that's a bad idea. I don't want to, set that precedent. It creates chaos we don't want, right? So we can do these things. And the way to counteract the problems that we're talking about here is like Julian said, is of course having friends that come from different places and have different perspectives than you. But you honestly don't even necessarily need that. All you have to do is look inward and recognize how easily you can be misunderstood, how easily you can be misinterpreted, what ideas people have about you in their heads that are totally wrong. Because I think basically everyone can relate to that, right? There's a reason why one of the most popular kinds of fiction is, the kid who's an outsider, who's, misunderstood, like all this popular music that is basically like, yeah, this is our thing. They don't get us, but we
Hmm.
get us kind of stuff, like X-Men. Like there's a reason that that kind of thing of feeling alienated, of feeling alone, of feeling misunderstood, of feeling misjudged. There's a reason that stuff is super popular. It's
The
because
model
everybody
work.
can relate to it. Everybody can relate to it. So
Yep.
tap into that and just go, okay, if it's happening to me, it has to also be happening to everyone else around me, because everyone else around me is not that different from me. We're all human beings. We all have those same core needs and desires, right? We're
Hmm.
wired very similarly at our core. And so if I'm being misunderstood this way, if people really don't get me this way, then I must not be getting everybody else
Right.
in similar ways. So that's
Yeah.
all you really need, that mirror.
No, absolutely right. I mean, there's so many things to unpack there, Angel. There's so many
Mhm.
things to unpack in what you said there, because I'm first thinking about the battling our own human nature, and me as a Christian, I think about how I battle my nature every single day.
Mhm.
I'm a married man, loving my wife and kids, but we have,
Right.
as men, there are things about us that we have to battle every single day.
Yeah.
That there's no question about that. And then you're right, talking about passing a fruit cart, and a fruit cart, or any other thing, and say, I want that. I
Right.
want that. Maybe I don't have the money for it, but I'm not going to grab it because it's not mine to take.
Mhm.
There's things that we have to think about when it comes to human nature that we can't just do. I mean, one of the things, being in this depolarization space that we all spend so much time in nowadays, I still battle myself every single day when I'm, searching through the internet, looking for topics, looking for things.
Mhm.
There is no lack of people out there trying to incite anger and grievance, and I call it fog, right? Fear, outrage, and grievance.
Nice.
There's
Yeah.
there's no lack of it, again, because that model, it works. Uh, it works, and to try and battle my own desire to engage in some of that stuff, it's a strong battle.
Mhm.
It's in my nature. It's something that it's completely uh, within me to want to engage with that stuff, but I don't do it now, because I do look back at my core principles, my core values, and say I want civility. And then
Mhm.
I also think about the whole unique thing, right? And we're all unique human beings. I talked about the Human Value Initiative with my friend Reggie Wilson, and how we're all very unique human beings, and makes our infinite, each one of our value is infinite, because we're so unique, but we
Mhm.
are so much alike with other people, and that idea that we're going through something that nobody else has ever gone through, it's not true. I mean, there's definitely more people out there that have gone through it. So whether you
Mhm.
know them, whether you've engaged with them, whether they are in your sphere of influence or not, there are people out there that are going through something very, very similar to what you're going through. And we may not know what their storm is, but we're all either going into, coming out of, or experiencing some kind of a storm.
Yep.
And we have to recognize that before we just go on the offense.
Mhm.
Completely agree. One of the things I've been realizing lately is to borrow a thing from Dave Chappelle's thing, Sticks and Stones. We're all humans having a human experience.
Yeah.
and we all have so much more in common with each other than there is difference. And it's also the case. One thing I've realized, again, having been here, it's very important to note in this interview, like I'm not throwing stones at trolls. Like I've been the people I'm criticizing, But one thing I realized is like hurting people hurt people, And so when I see someone lashing out at me on Twitter, it's like you are taking time out of your day to insult and attack a complete stranger.
Yeah.
What's gone wrong in your life to make this your most viable option,
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Because when I was doing that, it was like I had so much anger inside of me that just needed some kind of outlet, and it was eating me up inside. And so it's really worth noting, I think, that the people who attack us the harshest, people who we think just tear into us and insult us and, tell us to kill ourselves, whatever, like as awful as that is, they don't deserve our hate. They deserve our sympathy, our pity, our compassion. And at the highest spiritual levels, they deserve our love because they are human beings who are going through this immense suffering. And if we can help them out of it, then wonderful. But they don't need us to kick them when they're already very, very clearly already down.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You reminded me of two quotes from the amazing James Baldwin. The first one is,
Yeah.
Wilk, what you were talking about. You think your pain and your heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world, but then you read
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
and then obviously the parenthetical there is, and you discover that everything you're going through has been gone through by so many other people, so much so that it's been turned into art, and you can now consume that art, And then what Julian was just saying, one of the reasons people cling to their hate so stubbornly is because they sense that once the hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain. That's, if you want to know of a cheat code that's my cheat code. I keep that
Yeah.
quote in the back of my head every time I log on to Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so anytime I get venom and bile from people, I remember that quote. And I just think all that hostility, whatever it is, it just translates right back into pain. And that puts me in a different mindset, right? It's not I don't mean it in this condescending way, like, oh, these poor people. I just see it as it reframes it. I go, okay, this person's, the hostility and the venom here is coming from a place of hurt, and seeing it that way is helpful. Seeing it that way just lets me calm down and not reciprocate, and it just changes the tone for me. So whether I know what their pain is or not, doesn't matter. I know that anger, that hatred is coming from a place of fear or some kind of suffering, right? Because we're all here, we're all human, and being human is hard, so.
No, that's absolutely right. We've all got our battles. We've all got our pain. How we allow that pain to manifest in our lives and then project out onto others. It's tough, and we all have to keep that in mind. It's never going to be easy, and
Right.
if it was easy, everybody be doing it. And
we wouldn't have to have this conversation because
right.
That's
right.
actually, that's a point that I wanted to make sure to touch on, Wilk. You were talking about it a little bit, and Julian, you too, about how, principles are not principles when they're just easy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's easy to not cheat on your wife when there are no other women around in the whole world, right?
Right.
You're just walking around and you never see another woman on earth. So yeah, it's really easy to not cheat on your wife there, but it's much more difficult to not cheat on your wife when there are women everywhere. And if you're in some situation where, like, for some reason they're throwing themselves on you, right?
Yeah.
Now you actually have to have that principle and hang on to it. And you have to show your ability here, right? It's an actual effort. That's when it matters, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with like free speech, right? It's free speech is easy to advocate for when everyone around you is saying stuff that you agree with and you like.
Yeah, if it's popular.
Yeah, it gets really rough when people start saying crazy stuff that you're like, whoa, no, that's terrible. And if more people hear this and believe it, it's going to be even worse. That's when the free speech principle becomes a principle that is actually difficult. That's when you have it, right? Anywhere else, it's just kind of like, yeah, that's a nice thing to think. right?
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, one of the biggest things I've talked about, with the D-Rate the 8 podcast and ever since, getting into this depolarization thing is like, okay, yeah, the depolarization space is not the sexiest movement on the planet. It's not the one that's going to get you the most attention. It's not going to do the thing. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's one of the most important things that I've ever been involved in. And it's one of those things that I get so much gratification out of in seeing that, okay, not only for myself personally, because, I don't know about you guys, and we've all had some, we've all built some kind of personal or persona, whatever you call it, right? That we've got, our stuff is out there. And
Yeah.
there are so many others other than us that are taking their opportunity to spread toxicity and hate and just the fear, outrage, and grievance that I talk about. But for me, which I'm sure all three of us on here could do that, for me, I get a much greater sense of personal gratification out of the idea that I'm putting forth an idea that I think is incredibly important, but it's also something that I have to battle within myself on a daily basis to make sure that I'm doing the right way. Does that make sense? Because, yeah, I mean,
Julian, you have something? I don't want to monopolize.
Yeah.
I could go off on that for a long time.
Yeah.
So.
I'll have quick thoughts. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And yeah, it is a case where, yeah, this isn't easy, and it's not, this is not the way to a quick paycheck or a quick virality. I've kind of made my peace with the fact that because of how I write, I may become successful, but I will never be viral the way like Matt Walsh is viral or someone like that. And that's okay because I sleep really well at night. Like I can't know ultimately if I'm making the world a better place. I sincerely hope so. But I will say I go to bed every night knowing I did my best. And that's worth a lot to me.
Yeah. I think that's enough. And I actually think depolarization is very sexy. And here's my analogy. There's the kind of stereotypical hot guy, right? The bad boy that, girls like and gets all the attention, that kind of stuff. He's got the motorcycle and the leather jacket and, he might get into trouble and who knows, right? There's an allure to that.
Right.
But for like, girls like that. Women like a guy who is stable and present and mature and does the freaking dishes.
Right.
There are women out there right now who are like, oh my God, doing the dishes is so hot. Like the fact that I don't have to look into that sink and see a bunch of crap from the man child that I married. Just the fact that this guy took out the garbage without having to be told, like stuff like that. That's like, it should be obvious and nobody should get, a parade in celebration for having done it. But there's a thing about that, there's something about doing the stuff that is necessary and doing it well and doing it because it needs to get done. That is way more difficult than being a slob and destroying things, right? It's easy to knock down a tower of blocks. It takes way longer to put it together, right? Or like, setting dominoes, right? It's easy to flick that first domino and just have the effect go. It takes you days to set up that whole thing. You know what I mean? I think there's a mistake that we make. There's a concession that we make in this space where we kind of say, yeah, I know we're lame and we're boring because we're trying to talk about civility and we're trying to talk about not fighting with each other, and fighting is sexy and fighting is cool, but it's not. Fighting is horrible and it's destructive and it's everything that's wrong with everything that we're talking about. Civility is where it's at. Civility and compassion and progress, and those things are difficult. Those are the real difficult things. Like I think of like martial arts, right? It's really, really hard to belt up.
Yeah.
You have to get to a certain level. You have to be able to do certain things consistently well. And then you get this belt and it represents a certain amount of progress. That A guy off the street can't just get that. It takes effort. So anything that takes effort to me is worthwhile, is way more worthwhile than something you get easily. So you can get people angry really, really easily, and you can fight people really, really easily. But understanding them and then persuading them through a slow process of human interaction and compassion and listening, that's hard. If you could do that, then I'm impressed.
Yeah.
And I think the words that you said that I like the most there is because it needs to be done.
Yeah.
You know, it's not easy. It's we do it because it needs to be done. And, you know, it's not for the accolades. It's not for the fame, the fortune, the groupies, so to speak, or whatever. If they even do they still use that word anymore? Groupies?
Civility groupies, just
the civility groupies.
Dude,
but,
the way you re-articulated that guy's argument was so hot, you know.
Yeah. But no, because it needs to be done. It is absolutely the reason. It's reason enough. As you were saying, it's reason enough because it needs to be done. Guys, this has been an incredible conversation. The essay is incredible, and the movement that we're a part of is incredible. Whether it be following Angel, follow Julian, follow the D-Rate the 8 podcast, or Braver Angels, and getting involved in like our Rise for America movement. This is one of the biggest issues of our time, and depolarization is one of the most important things I've ever got involved in, because polarization, like our mutual friend John Wood Jr. says, polarization is the one problem that ensures all other problems won't be solved. This is something that has to be done because it needs to be done, and I'm going to continue to fight. I know you guys are going to continue to fight, and
or not fight.
Yeah. Fight figuratively. I gave up fighting for real a long time ago. Way too many, too many broken bone stitches and bloodshed for that. So, but thank you guys for joining me here again on the D-Rate the 8 podcast. Always a pleasure to speak with both of you. Great friendships built over the past couple years with you guys, and I greatly appreciate all you're doing. Anything you guys want to finish this out with? Anything you guys got coming up? I know we'll obviously link to this essay in the Colette in the show notes. But Julian, you got anything coming up? And then we'll finish out with Angel.
Nothing coming up. But if anyone listening wants to find my work, I'm a writer for the Foundation for Economic Education, so fee.org. And then you can find me on Twitter too at Julian_Liberty. Very
nice.
I'm at StrangelEdWeird on Twitter or X or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And
we're just gonna keep dead naming Twitter.
Yeah, we should just keep dead naming Twitter.
Yeah.
I guess the last thing is just to remember that also you're not alone in this. It's really, really hard to do what we're talking about, but there are whole groups and organizations dedicated to facilitating that stuff. Braver Angels, Fire, Fair, you're not alone here. There's a whole crew of people, and there are resources and there are tools and there are ways to strengthen these muscles so that you get better at doing them yourself. So seek these things out. There's no reason you need to take on this challenge alone. We're all here. Let's all do it together. It's way better that way.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, my friends, Julian Adorney and Angel Eduardo. Until our next conversation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the D-Rate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week, saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.